Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel on this glorious Sunday. Go Patriots, go. Tom Brady, the GOAT, of course, is playing in a couple of hours. Very excited about that. And I'm very excited that you guys have decided to join me here on this weekend as we talk about all our favorite things in the world. Of course, that's movies, maybe a little bit of television here and there, sprinkle in some other stuff as well. Here's how today's show is going to go. I have picked out 4 topics that you guys have emailed into me. Now, how do you get a topic or a question on the John Campea Show? It's simple. You just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com. Once again, that's john@thejohncampeashow.com. And guys, make sure you put that word topic in the subject line. That way I know that your email is meant for the John Campea Show. Put the word topic in the subject line. Now, after we get through the 4 topics you guys have emailed into me, we're going to go over to the live questions, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. You'll be able to send in live questions, of course, via Super Chat. Now, going to make an announcement that I've been making the last couple of days, and here's that. Starting tomorrow, that's on Monday, the John Campea Show, as responding to a bunch of requests that many of the viewers have sent in to me, the John Campea Show is being moved. There's a couple of changes coming. Is being moved to 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 11 a.m. East Coast time. So 8 a.m. Los Angeles time, 11 a.m. New York time. If you live in a different time zone, just go look it up, and you'll be able to find when that is for you guys. So that's moving to them. Also, the show is going to be much shorter. It's probably going to be anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes long, and I'm only going to be taking a couple of live questions. It's mostly going to focus on movie news and the emails and topics that you guys email into me, and I'll take a couple of live questions, but that's about it. Then what I am doing, since we all love live talk, is that I am starting a new daily show Monday through Friday called Open Mic. I might change the name to Open Mic with John Campea, but whatever. It's called Open Mic because it's just all live questions. We're going to broadcast for about an hour at 4 p.m. Los Angeles time. That's 7 p.m. New York time. And that's going to be Monday through Friday, and that, of course, starts tomorrow. So starting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Los Angeles time, 11 a.m. New York time, is the John Campea Show. And then the new show, which is all live questions from you guys, open discussion about all the stuff going on in the world, is going to be at 4 p.m. Los Angeles time. That's 7 p.m. New York time, and it's called Open Mic. Now, I'm going to make one more little announcement here. One of the kind of exciting things that I'm excited about doing with Open Mic is that I am going to start taking audio and video questions from you guys. So, if you guys want to send in an MP3 for an audio question, or if you want to send me a link to a unlisted YouTube video that you make that you want me to use on the show, you can email me that MP3 or email me that link to a YouTube video. Simply email me to john@thejohncampeashow.com, but in the subject line, don't put the word topic, put the words open mic. That way I know that your email is an audio or a video question for the Open Mic Show. And guys, I'll put all this in my social media stuff, in my Twitter and Facebook, so you can see it there too. But your question, your video or your audio file has to be 20 seconds or less. It's got to be 20 seconds or less. So if you send me some video with you ranting on for about 5 minutes like me, then I'm just going to ignore your email. So your audio files or your video file has to be 20 seconds or less. Just letting you guys know that in advance. So I'm excited about that. Keep your eyes on my social media as I do all my posting to let you guys know about that stuff. Now, also one more quick disclaimer before we get going with everything here is, again, I've got the bronchitis, which means I've got a cough, and I'm probably still going to have it for another few weeks. So in order to try to fight the cough, I have to have these menthol lozenges in my mouth quite often, and I'm sipping on tea. So I'm not trying to be rude by eating candy and drinking drinks during the show. It's just I have to do it, or else I'm going to be coughing and hacking and wheezing throughout the entire show. So with all that out of the way, let's get to the first official topic today. And the first official topic today comes to us from Samuel Polay, who writes, with the resoundingly forgettable premiere of Maze Runner: The Death Cure, and with apparently no major young adult adaptations on the horizon, can we finally jump for joy and declare that the YA genre is dead? Finally, no more special teens saving the world. All right, thanks a lot for the question, Samuel, but you know what? You're not going to like what I have to say. You're not going to like my response. And my response is simply this. YA movies are simply no different than any other genre of movie. There are a bunch of bad ones, and there are a few really good ones. I am a fan of the Hunger Games movies, for example. You can make a very solid argument. I got in a debate with somebody once arguing that Harry Potter is not a YA novel. But I think I lost that debate. I think they convinced me otherwise. I think they convinced me that you can make the argument that Harry Potter are YA novels. And I think they got a point. There are great YA movies based on YA novels. There's a bunch of crap too, but that's the same as any genre. You get comedies, whole bunch of them are crap, a few of them are really great. You know, that's just the way they work. Maze Runner has not opened yet in North America. I think it opens next week here. And I'll say, look, I thought the first Maze Runner movie was actually okay. I liked the first Maze Runner. I admit I liked the first Maze Runner movie. Thought the second one was a pile of garbage. But at any rate, so we got the third one coming out now, and there have been a bunch of flops along the way. And I'll be honest with you, I don't hear anybody buzzing for Death Cure. That's the name of the new Maze Runner movie. I'm certainly not excited about and all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing, Samuel, that you mentioned in your email that I do hear a lot of fans often going. Here's my question. Why don't you want these movies getting made? And that's my question. I remember I had this discussion with somebody about both about the Twilight films and about the 50 Shades films. And I'm not a fan of the Twilight films in general, although I don't hate the Twilight films as much as most people do. I certainly do detest the 50 Shades, but this whole notion of, can we celebrate that these movies won't get made anymore? Why? Is there some kind of Gestapo in your hometown that forces you to go and watch every movie that comes out, Samuel? Is there some kind of law in your town that everybody in your town has to go and watch every single movie that comes out? Because my question is this, if you don't have to go watch these movies, why complain that they get made? Especially if there are other people out there who do enjoy those movies. Because look, I can crap on the Twilight movies all I want. The fact of the matter is, there's a big group of people out there who love going to watch those movies. I don't like them. I'm not going to sit here and say that I like them, and I will crap on them if people bring them up and ask me about them, yes. But I'm not going to sit here and go, celebrate, yay, they'll never make them again, yay! Why? How did that affect me? How did those movies getting made affect me? Now, my job is as a film pundit, so unlike you, I do have to go watch that crap. But, I mean, what's the point? I really don't understand. I do not understand the idea of people celebrating something failing or something not getting made when there are groups of people out there who want to go see it and enjoy it. Doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't mean you have to say you like it. It doesn't mean you don't get to criticize it, because you do get to criticize it, and you do get to avoid it, and you get to skip it if you want, and you get to have your opinion about it. But I'll never understand this mentality that a lot of film fans have that, I don't like YA movies, so I hope they die. Well, why? There are people out there who like them. I mean, that's just it. So, and I'll crap on them. I'll say this movie's a piece of garbage if it's a piece of garbage. Whether other people like them or not, that's irrelevant. I will give my opinion on them. But I don't have to go see it. You don't have to go see it if you don't want to. So, what's the point? What's the point in celebrating the death of a genre? What's the point of that? How did it affect you in any way? And anyway, that's a question that I have to have this debate with friends of mine all the time. About, oh my God, it comes up to even a large scale. A lot of people hoping that the DC EU fails. Why would you hope that it fails? Why would you not hope? If you like comic book movies, why would you not hope that they're good? Hey, if it comes out and you don't like it, criticize it by all means. But why would you want it? Why would you want DC movies to fail and go away? You should want them to be good, so then you have another good movie to watch. You should want, if Death Maze or Death Cure comes out, if Maze Runner Death Cure comes out, you should hope it's a great movie. If you're a film fan, why would you not hope it's a great movie? Why would you not want a movie that gets made to be good? I will never understand the mentality that I don't want that movie to be good. What? How? Why? How does it being good hurt you? How does it not being good help you? I will never understand that mentality, dude. And like I said, a lot of my friends and I have this debate all the time. So you're not alone, Samuel. I mean, like, a lot of my friends, I have this debate with them too, as I'm having the debate with you right now, but I will just never get the feeling that I don't like that movie, therefore I hope the next movie in that franchise is a bad movie, and I hope it fails. Why? What do you get out of that? How does it existing hurt you? And anyway, that's just the questions that I have. But anyway, thank you for sending in the question, Samuel. The next one comes to us from Patreon supporter Nathan Oswald, who writes, is Mad Max 5 dead? Or is it still planning on happening? All right, great question. Ever since 2015, because there came news and reports back in 2015 that George Miller, the director of Mad Max, had 2 new movies planned. And they were going to do this and they were going to do that. And I just want to bring up something here on my computer screen here so I have the information. But back in 2015, or when all these reports came out, and George Miller started talking about how I've got 2 more movies planned, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and all this kind of stuff is going to be great and wonderful, and blah, blah, blah. And then we heard nothing. For years, we've heard nothing. Now, a lot of people believe that Mad Max 5, for argument's sake, was a no-brainer. Because everybody loved Mad Max Fury Road. I really liked Mad Max Fury Road. I didn't love it as much as most people. I thought it had some weaknesses to it, but I really enjoyed the film. I went to the theater to see it multiple times. I think it's a very good movie. And most people seem to agree. It's at least a very good movie. So there's been an assumption out there that Mad Max 5 is an inevitability because it's great. But I've always kind of cautioned people about that because while a lot of people celebrate the movie, and while it's really good, and it won some Academy Awards, the fact of the matter is this. A lot of people forget that Mad Max Fury Road did not do all that well at the box office. It made less than $400 million. It made, I think the number was like 378. I'm trying to load up Box Office Mojo, but it's, for whatever reason, Box Office Mojo, I'm getting this message saying that it's currently, oh no, sorry, now it's popped up. It was saying Box Office Mojo is under maintenance, and it is. It's $378.8 million on a $150 million budget. Now you do the math. So take 400 or 378 minus 1/3 because of what the theaters keep. Take that 150 million, add about another 50 to 75 million dollars for its marketing costs, and now suddenly you got a movie that's struggling to break even. So I've been saying that for some time. It's like, don't think that some Mad Max film is an automatic. But John, everybody loved it. It may be, but it struggled at the box office as far as a big blockbuster movie goes. It struggled. So then on top of that, about a month or 2 ago, a new wrinkle of drama came into play with Mad Max. And that's that Mad Max Fury Road director George Miller has filed a lawsuit against Warner Brothers over Mad Max Fury Road. Now, in Hollywood numbers, $7 million doesn't sound like all that much, but George Miller, I believe this is in November, started a lawsuit against Warner Brothers for $7 million. So right now they're involved in a legal battle, George Miller and Warner Brothers. Now, my understanding is that the lawsuit is over, that George Miller was supposed to be paid a bonus, a $7 million bonus, if he was able to keep the final shooting budget of the movie under like $157 million or something like that. Warner Brothers claims he didn't keep it under that number. George Miller claims it would have been kept under that number, except Warner Brothers asked for a whole bunch of extra stuff to be added into the movie, a number of changes, some extra stuff, and that forced the budget to go over the number. Warner Brothers is saying, hey, we didn't say whatever, we just said if the budget stays under this, and at the end of the day it didn't stay under that. George Miller saying, I would have kept it under that, except for the changes that you wanted, and so you've got this legal battle going on now. So, and that tells me a couple things. If Mad Max Fury Road had made $800 million worldwide, I really don't think Warner Brothers would be sweating $7 million. I think they'd be saying, sure thing, George. Hey, tell us where to send the check, $7 million. Fact of the matter is, this was a movie that barely broke even, if it broke even at all. So $7 million becomes a big deal to Warner Brothers. They don't want to pay him out for that money. They don't want to pay him out for that bonus. And they're not all that anxious to make another Mad Max movie when the first one barely broke even. And they're thinking, if we cut this check for $7 million to George Miller, officially, Mad Max Fury Road will have lost us money. Now, on top of that, you got a lawsuit between the director and the studio, and the likelihood, and then you got Tom Hardy getting busier and busier. The likelihood of Mad Max 5 is not done, all right? I don't think it's impossible that this movie eventually happens. But I think the more time that passes, the longer this lawsuit drags out, if it's still dragging out, I think it makes it less likely. So I'll say this. I'm not saying that it's unlikely that we'll get a Mad Max 5. What I am saying, though, is don't be surprised if we don't. Just don't be surprised if we don't get a Mad Max 5. That's all I'm saying. Okay, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying don't be surprised if it doesn't, because there are financial realities. More time is passing. On top of that, you've got a legal battle going on between the director of the films and the studio. It just brings it all more and more into question. More and more into question. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from TyJuan, who writes, "Hello, John. I hope you feel better soon." Well, I actually feel pretty good. It's just this cough is just annoying me, that's all. But I feel pretty good, but thank you for asking. Would you rather have Agent Colson in the movies, or do you feel he has a better fit on television? Thanks a lot for the question, man. And yeah, Agent Colson is, for me, personally, as a fan, is a character in a very interesting position for somebody like me, just a fan. And that is this. I love this character, and I certainly love the actor playing him, Clark Gregg, but I am not a fan of the show that he's in. I keep watching it because he's in it. I keep watching it because Agent Colson is there and Clark Gregg is there. So I keep watching the show. And every time I watch the show, like, sometimes I get like, oh, that episode wasn't so bad. And then they'll rip off 2 or 3 episodes in a row where I'm going, oh my God, what are they doing? And look, I know Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has its fans out there. That's great. I'm not trying to poo-poo on you or poo-poo on the fact that you like it. I'm just being honest with you and tell you this is not a show that has ever really worked for me. It's had its moments. It's had a few little stretches where it's been not bad. But for me overall, it's just not a great show. But I love this character. And I love the actor playing him. And so because he's there, I got to tell you, if he wasn't there, I probably don't watch another episode. But what is workable, him and Ming-Na make workable to me. But anyway. The question, should he be in the movies or should he be in the TV series? There are actually 2 different answers to that. From my perspective, at least at any rate. Perspective number 1. What would be best for the properties? So, would Agent Colson make a bigger, more positive impact on the television series Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or would he make a bigger, more positive impact on Avengers, the movie series, and in the MCU movies? That's one question. The second question is, what would be best for the character? Would it be best for the character to be on the television series, or will it be best for the character to be in the movies? So 2 separate questions. Let's address that first question. Which medium would benefit the most from having Clark Gregg and Agent Colson? Would the TV series benefit more, or would the movie series benefit more? And I will say that the TV series benefits more. Because here's the reality. In the MCU, you are loaded with great characters, great performers, great movies, top to bottom, all this kind of stuff. You put in Agent Colson and Clark Gregg into that environment, it'll be a nice little addition, but it's not going to make a world of difference to the MCU for Agent Colson to now be in the movies. It's not going to change the game for the MCU, right? However, from my point of view, just mine as an individual fan sharing his opinion, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't exist without Clark Gregg and Agent Colson. I mean, that show is barely watchable with him on it. You take him out, that show is just not watchable. You know, in the Avengers in the MCU, you don't change the game by adding Coulson in there. You take Coulson out of the TV series, that changes everything, and not for the better. So, to the question of which area would benefit most from having Clark Gregg and Agent Colson, the television series. It's definitely. The character makes its biggest impact on S.H.I.E.L.D. and on television. With that, I have no doubt. I don't think there's any question about that. He'd be a nice little addition to the MCU for sure. I'd love to see him there, but he would just be a nice addition. He changes the game on television because his presence there or his lack of presence there would tip the scale dramatically on whether or not that show's even watchable. So that's how I would answer that part of the question. Now, the second part of the question, what would be best for the character and for the actor Clark Gregg? To me, get him out of that TV series and put him in Avengers. Take Agent Colson, pull him out of that TV series, and put him in Avengers. I think that's what would be best for the character. So, here's the thing. On the one hand, from the IP's point of view, it's best to keep him in S.H.I.E.L.D. From the character's point of view and from a fan point of view, I would much rather see him in the MCU. So if I'm the head of Disney, what do? And it pains me to say this, but I keep him on the TV series. Because he has a big, big impact on the TV series. He is what that entire series is built around. And he is the thing that keeps it together, in my opinion. Whereas if I plucked him out of there and put him in the Avengers MCU, it might be best for Clark Gregg, it might be best for the character, but all it would be is a nice addition to the movie universe, and it would just cripple the television one. So, yeah, two answers, but overall, if I was in charge of Disney, I keep him on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because he's doing the most good there. Anyway, that's just my thought on that. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next and final email question of the day comes to us from one of my Patreon supporters, Nak-hyun, who writes, I agree there's more to the galaxy far, far away than just about the Skywalker family. With Disney creating new generations of Star Wars stories, wouldn't they alienate or lose old fans? Wouldn't they lose or alienate old fans who grew up and came back to support the familiar theme or characters like Luke, Han, Leia, etc.? All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And a special big thank you for being a Patreon supporter. You're one of the reasons this channel even exists. Thank you so much for that. This brings up a really big issue that I know a lot of people in the chat board were even talking about before the show started. Like saying, John, how can you say that Star Wars needs to move on from the original fans and blah, blah. I am an original fan, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Here's the thing. Let's look at history. Let's, for example, look at Star Trek, okay? Let's look at Star Trek. Here's an interesting number for you, too. I think there have been like 10 or 11 Star Trek movies, something along those lines. Star Wars: The Last Jedi is just crossing $1.3 billion at the box office by itself. It's the number 5 all-time money-making domestic movie of box office history. Right now, it's the number 10 all-time worldwide box office movie in history. It's the number 2 all-time Star Wars movie. Only one Star Wars movie's ever made more money, and that's The Force Awakens. At $1.3 billion, Star Wars: The Last Jedi has almost made more money than all the Star Trek movies put together. Wrap your head around that. By itself, Star Wars: The Last Jedi has almost made more money at the box office, the one movie, than all of the Star Trek movies put together. I believe the overall Star Trek universe box office take is $1.4 billion in total. Star Wars: The Last Jedi, all by itself, is $1.3 billion. Just kind of a weird number to put into context there. But at any rate, let's look at Star Trek. Star Trek was a popular franchise. It moved into the movies with some success. But what we started to see happening in Star Trek, and I remember I made a number of videos about this before the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie came out, which is simply this. Star Trek was literally a dying franchise. It had been around forever, and the original fan base was literally dying off. You had people who were fans of the original Star Trek, and they were dying. And they were not being replaced with a new generation of fans. That's the big part there, too, is that in Star Trek, they faced this conundrum that they had this universe, it was dying in popularity, they were like, literally some of their original fans were dying off, and they were not adding a new generation of fans. New fans were not coming along. Let's look at the box office numbers. This just kind of illustrates the point. Now, ignore 1, 2, and 3, which are all the new movies. But, like, say in 1996, look at the number 5 movie there, Star Trek First Contact. There was a resurgence at the box office when you had movies with the Next Generation cast. And that movie made $92 million, which was the highest grossing of all that first slate of Star Trek movies before J.J. Abrams took over. So these are domestic numbers, by the way. So you had First Contact, which is the number 1 box office movie domestically of all the Star Trek movies that came before it, was First Contact. Because now you're moving into a new set of things with the Next Generation. So even there you had a little bit of an iteration moving from original cast now into Next Generation movies. So there was a little bit of a renewed interest there. But ever since then, what you started seeing was a massive downward trajectory. Because you go from that movie in 1996, Star Trek First Contact, now go down to number 11 there. The next movie that came out after that was Star Trek Insurrection. And look at the nosedive the box office took. It went from $92 million down to $70 million. Now, let's look at the trend. So you go from $92 million down to $70 million, about a 25% drop. So what happens next? Well, look at the next movie that came out after that. The next movie that came out after Star Trek Insurrection was in 2002 with Star Trek Nemesis. And look at the box office. All the way down at the bottom, number 13, $43 million. And then all those films in the middle, all hovering around, except for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, which came in at, $52 million. Pardon me. And it wasn't until generations after that when they started bringing in, like it was that final Star Trek original cast movie that kind of hit rock bottom with $52 million. Then you bring in Generations and it gets a renewed interest. But even then, it starts to die off until you end off with that final one, Insurrection, which ends up at just $42 million. Star Trek was facing a problem. Their fan base, the series had been so successful and been around for so long, and they tried for so long to just pander to the original fans that it just eventually started dying off. And new fans were not coming on board. These are indisputable facts. I remember hearing one of the big organizers of one of the big Trek conventions too talking about that. It's that interest in the conventions was waning and dying off. It's just the fan base was dying off. Eventually, time catches up even with the best IP. Time eventually catches up even with the best movie franchises. But look what happened to Star Trek. Because after Star Wars Nemesis, or Star Trek Nemesis, I should say, in 2002, where they just made $43 million, they decided, you know what? It's time for us to stop pandering just to the original fans. Paramount looked at themselves in the mirror and said, look, we want elements of this to stay true to Star Trek, sure. We want it to be recognizable, sure. But we can no longer just make Star Trek properties. We can no longer make Star Trek movies. We can no longer make Star Trek shows that just target those original fans. Because that fan base was dying off and it wasn't winning any new fans. It's just a fact. That's not subjective. That's not an opinion. That's proven fact. And the studios knew it. The creators knew it. And they decided, you know what? It's time to do something new. Let's update Star Trek. Let's do a modern Star Trek kind of movie. We'll keep those original names, but we got a very different Kirk. We got a different kind of Spock. We got a different type of Star Trek adventure. And look what happened. We go from 2002 at the very bottom of the list to 2009 at the very top of the list. So we go from Star Trek Nemesis making $43 million domestically at the box office to Star Trek, the first J.J. Abrams movie in 2009, 7 years later, making $257 million. And each of the two movies after that have made significantly more than any of the Star Trek movies that came before it, with Into Darkness making $228 and Star Trek Beyond making $158 million. Now, you can make an argument there's a little bit of a downward trajectory there, for sure. But even with its downward trajectory, Star Trek Beyond made nearly double what any of the previous Star Trek movies did. And what happened? Even though Star Trek now got a new shot of life into it, even though now more people were coming to the movie theaters to see Star Trek movies than in any of the generations before it, and you're having much bigger success than any of the previous Star Trek movies had, who were the people that were complaining the most? The original fans. But at some point, Paramount had to make the decision that if Star Trek was going to survive, if Star Trek was going to bring in new generations of fans, if Star Trek was going to grow beyond what it had been, they needed to make some changes, and they needed to adopt a philosophy that they were no longer just going to pander their stuff to the original fans, because sticking on that course, while it had success in the past, was eventually going to kill the franchise. They didn't spit in the face of the original fans. They still made it recognizably Star Trek, but they realized we can no longer make Star Trek films that simply pander to the original fans. Because we've been doing that for decades and our damn property's been dying. And they knew it. And they recognized it. And they took action, and the result of their action was bigger success than they have ever had before. And you know, it's funny. I have been crapping on, and we'll get back to Star Wars here in a second, but all this illustrates the point with the argument I'm going to be making with Star Wars here. You have this new CBS All Access Star Trek show, Star Trek Discovery, that I pissed all over before the show came out. I thought it was a terrible idea, all this kind of stuff. But you know what? Doesn't matter that I said that. I put my expectations down when the show came out, watched it with an open mind, and you know what? I love that show. I love it. Is it significantly different than the original Star Trek? You damn right it is. Yes, it is. I grew up watching reruns of the original Star Trek series. I have a deep appreciation for the original Star Trek series, but I'm also a realist that understands it needs to change and adapt and stop just pandering to the original fan base. And here's the fun thing. I find most of the people who just adore this show were not hardcore fans of the original. And the ones that I find are most vocally against this show are the ones who are hardcore fans of the original. And that's fine. Because when Paramount was making these movies and making these TV shows just to pander to the hardcore fans of the originals who refused to evolve, they were dying. Their IP was dying. And there are some people out there that would rather go down with the ship than rather see their beloved IP, Star Trek, evolve and change and do what it needs to do to appeal to a new generation of fans and bring in new fan bases and things like that to stay alive and vibrant. You know, even in business, and I know I'm going on really long about this, but I think this is a big issue. Even in business, me and different people on the corporate level will often talk about that sometimes, you know, I was with AMC, and we were pretty successful at AMC, doing what we were doing with our online movie news stuff. But even then, we used to have discussions that every once in a while, we have to have a burn, what we would call a burn rate. We have to try something new that may burn off about 20% of our existing viewers, but in an attempt to gain an additional 30% of viewers. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we had to make decisions that we knew were going to tick off some of our existing fan base because we believed it would be the right move to attract an even bigger fan base. And you have to have what's called an acceptable burn rate. Star Trek understood, Paramount understood, they needed to have an acceptable burn rate and no longer pander just to the original fans. Okay, so there's my point. Paramount completely understood that. The box office numbers completely prove it. And it left some fans of the original fan, or some fans of the original material, a little bit put off. Okay, that happens. How does all this apply to Star Wars? Well, let's look at the wording of the original question again. And what Nog was asking is, he goes, can we move forward with creating new stories that don't center around Luke and Vader and Leia? Won't that alienate the existing fan base? My answer to that question is yes. It will alienate some of the existing fan base who plant their feet in the cement and refuse to let anything evolve. It will alienate some of the original fan base. There is no doubt about that. I remember I took an email a couple of weeks ago on the John Campea Show, and somebody wrote in and saying, my dad said he's not going to watch anything that doesn't have Han Solo in it. There are people, that's the reality. There are people out there, and there's nothing wrong with this. You can be a fan on whatever level you want. But there are people out there who are not interested in Star Wars. They're interested in Han Solo. There are people out there who aren't interested in Star Wars. They're interested in Luke Skywalker. In particular, the Luke Skywalker specifically that they remember from 3 decades ago. There are people out there who are not fans of Star Wars. They're fans of the trio of Han, Luke, and Leia as they were 3 decades ago. And that's fine. But much like Star Trek was in a conundrum that Paramount had to say, if we keep just going down the path of only trying to target all of our stuff and pander to the fans of the originals and the original fan base, if we keep doing that, eventually we are going to be in the same situation that Star Trek was in. We're going to get into a position where our fan base will literally start dying off. We may keep the original fan base happy, and everybody will talk positively, and everybody will be happy, but they'll be happy while our numbers drop and drop and drop and drop and drop and drop until we have our own version of Star Trek Insurrection that makes $42 million. I believe Lucasfilm and Disney, and remember, you're talking to the world's biggest fan of the original trilogy of Star Wars. There's nobody who's there are certainly numbers of people out there who are as big of a fan as me. You ain't going to find anybody out there who's a bigger fan than me of the original trilogy of Star Wars. You know this. As I drink from my 3PO coffee mug. You know this. But I am also a realist. At some point, regardless of how good the numbers look now, Disney and Lucasfilm have to look at look, Carrie's already passed away. Harrison Ford isn't going to be around forever. Mark Hamill isn't going to be around forever. If we want the IP of Star Wars, if we want the property and the franchise of Star Wars to continue on, to thrive and exist and be all these things that it needs to be, then at some point, Lucasfilm and Disney have to say, we need to start looking at a time where we don't make our properties simply to pander to the fans of the original. And some might say, but John, fans of the original are how we got this successful. Yes, I'm not denying that. I'm one of those fans. But that's not going to sustain you for the next 20 years. Disney wants this thing like Paramount wants Star Trek to exist for another 30, 40, 50 years. If Disney wants to not be short-sighted and just look at what will work for the next 2 to 3 years, but rather look at what will set us up for success for the next 15 years, for the next 20 years, they have to start looking at not just pandering to me. They can no longer just pander to me. The guy who just loves the original Star Wars trilogy more than anything else they've ever put out, you can no longer just target it at me. That doesn't mean you abandon me. That doesn't mean you spit in my face or anything like that. But you have to start looking at other things and move forward and move on from the original fan base. And hopefully a good chunk of the original fan base will still appreciate and like the new stuff you're doing and will come along for the ride as you're adding new generations of fans understanding you're going to have a burn rate where you're going to lose some of the original fans along the way, and that just has to be acceptable losses. Now, was The Last Jedi a step in that direction? I don't know. I mean, that's honestly, my whole philosophy on this is the philosophy I had before The Last Jedi ever came out. I mean, this is a philosophy I've had for over a year. I remember me and Christian Harloff having a discussion about this like over a year ago about, at some point, Lucasfilm needs to start looking beyond the original fan base of Star Wars for the good of the franchise. And you know what? There are people who disagree with me, and that's fine. I even see people in my own chat board who are calling me names because they don't like what I'm saying. That's fine. But I have seen the history of film franchises do this. And those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And I am a fan of the originals. And you can sit there and call me names and you can say anything you want, and that's totally fine. It doesn't change the reality of the situation. And again, don't change this into a debate about The Last Jedi. This has nothing to do with The Last Jedi. Whether you loved it or hated it or anything like that, I'm talking about the future and where we go. And you're going to have to start making Star Wars movies without Luke. You're going to have to start making Star Wars movies without Leia. You're going to have to start making Star Wars movies without Vader or Yoda or whatever. If you want this franchise to evolve and move forward, you got to move on. You got to go into uncharted territory. You have to be willing to move on from the past. Hopefully a lot of us from the past will want to come along for the ride, but there's going to be a certain number of us who don't, and that's okay. Anyway, guys, I've gone on a lot about that, but Star Wars is actually obviously a really big, important thing to me, so I talked about that a lot. So anyway, I'm sure a lot of you guys have a lot of opinions about that, and you're going to want to share your opinions, and I get it, and that's great. That's what being a film fan is all about, that we get to have these discussions and these debates, just like we do offline with our friends in real life, and we're going to have different points of view. And we're going to have different opinions on that, and that's totally okay. If you agree with me, you're a very intelligent person. But if you don't agree with me, you're also a very intelligent person, and that's totally fine. Anyway, I just wanted to give you some food for thought and something to put in there with everything else that you're thinking about when it comes to this issue. Anyway, let's move on now to the live questions. Now, before I get to the live questions, let me give you my little shameless plug for the one thing that keeps my channel alive and going, and that is my Patreon campaign. Listen, guys, do me a favor. If you're one of those people who watches my videos on any type of regular basis and you enjoy hanging out here, do me a favor. Head on over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. Check out that page, and it'll give you all the information about what it means to be a Patreon supporter, how being a Patreon supporter makes these shows even possible, and what benefits there are to being a Patreon supporter as well. And then after reading all that, if you decide you want to become a Patreon supporter and make these shows possible, awesome. You are one of the reasons this show exists. And if not, that's perfectly fine. I'm just glad you're here being a film fan with us. All right. With that out of the way, it's time to go over to the live questions. By the way, guys, I should have said this earlier because a whole hell of a lot of live questions have come in. But if you have not sent in a live question yet, please do not send any more live questions. Do not send in any more live questions. I'm looking at the live time right now, and the live time is 10:44, so I'm not going to take any more questions that come after 10:44 on the timestamps. And I'll see if I can get through all these on this Sunday, because then I got to go and get ready to watch my Patriots move on to the Super Bowl. But do not sleep on the Jaguars, man. Okay, anyway. The first question today, the first comment and live question comes into us from Shivam Dixit, who writes, "Hey John, could you talk about the magic of the movies, from the movie-going experience to escapism, to the way these art forms invoke many emotions in me? I adore films. What makes movies special to you?" Shivam, it's a great question, but that is an hour-long discussion. Talk about why movies are great. I can't do that in 1 minute, in 30 seconds. All I will say is this. As I mentioned on the show the other day, the reason the movies are so great and so important to me is that movies are the ultimate expression of storytelling. They express what we are, what we want to be, what we could be, what we hope for, and what we fear, all in one art form. And on that, it becomes a universal experience. Regardless of your sexual orientation, your financial background, your race, your religion, your gender, we all watch the movies and we all experience them. It is a universal experience, expressing all those things we talked about before. And for that reason and many more, and I cannot go into any more than that, or else I'm going to be spending 10 minutes on the topic. That is why movies are so important to me. John Campea P writes, do actors get paid for cameos like Scarlett Johansson in Thor? Yes. Now, don't get me wrong. They don't get paid like what they would have got paid if they were in a starring role in the movie. But whenever an actor appears in a film or their likeness or image appears in the film, they have to get paid. And they work out those deals between their representatives in the studio. They work out that deal. But yes, Scarlett Johansson got some kind of a paycheck for appearing and her likeness appearing in Thor. Let's see. Luiz Garza 1000 writes, thoughts on Incredibles 2 centering on Elastic Girl this time while Mr. Incredible is at home being a housewife. Well, he's not a housewife. He's a stay-at-home dad. Also, will it beat Finding Dory's record? Well, technically speaking, Toy Story 3 made the most money. I think Finding Dory made $1.02 billion at the box office, while in Toy Story 3, I believe, $1.06 billion at the box office. So technically speaking, I think Toy Story 3, I could be wrong about that, but I think Toy Story 3 is the biggest money-making movie out of Pixar. But will Incredibles 2 cross $1 billion? Man, it's a tall order. The $1 billion club is a huge thing. I'm going to guess no. I think Incredibles will make in the $700 to $800 million range. I don't think it's going to join the $1 billion club because people take that number for granted, man. The $1 billion club is a very, 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 very difficult club to get into. It's just, yeah. So it absolutely might, for sure. I wouldn't bet against it, but my initial guess is probably going to be closer to the $800 million range. Richard Green writes, isn't it likely that Solo trailer is delayed simply to prevent confusion with The Last Jedi? Well, look, Disney has Black Panther coming out, but that hasn't stopped them from putting out an Avengers Infinity War trailer. So I don't know that would be the reason. Because, again, Disney's putting out Infinity War trailers when we got Black Panther coming out, so they don't seem to be worried about confusion. So I'm not really quite sure that would be the overriding reason we haven't got it yet. It's an interesting theory, Richard. I just think Disney's pattern of behavior kind of points away from that. Could be wrong, though. Nick Smith writes, do you think Netflix's The Punisher was Emmy-worthy? I liked it a lot. I did. But Emmy-worthy? If I'm one of the Emmy things, probably not. No. I think it was great. I enjoyed it a great deal. But from an art point of view, it's just not on the same level as of a lot of the other shows. So I would say no, even though I love the show myself. Caden Stab writes, Lucasfilm / Disney needs to stop messing with canon in Star Wars. Well, other than that whole, hi, I'm Poe, hi, I'm Rey, other than that one little detail that came out of the novelization, and you heard me rant about that the other day. That bothered me a lot. It does bother me. Technically speaking, Lucasfilm and Disney have not messed with canon at all, really. So I don't see how they've messed with canon. You'll have to write me an email, Kate, and explain to me how you see them messing with canon, because other than that one thing, which pissed me off, and it did bother me, I don't see any other examples of them messing with canon, per se. Maximum Effort T44T writes, what a fight from Stipe, such a smart fighter. For those who don't know what he's talking about the UFC heavyweight title fight last night between Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou. And it was a lot. Francis is one of the scariest monsters walking the face of the earth. And he was actually the favorite to beat the champion, Stipe Miocic. And Stipe is the baddest man on the planet. Stipe fought such a brilliant fight. Won it. I was really excited and fun and happy, and it was a great thing. If you're not a UFC fan, man, you should be a UFC fan. It's such a great sport. Let's see here. Parzival writes, if Logan doesn't get nominated for anything at the Oscars, is there something we as fans can do? Thanks, Jod, and sad not to see Italy in the World Cup. Don't even remind me. The only reason I watch the World Cup is because Italy's in there, and every year has an actual chance at winning. They didn't even qualify for the World Cup this year. Give me a break. Forza Italia. Anyway, no. Look, the Academy, who's made up of actors, directors, writers, producers, cinematographer, studio execs, blah, blah, blah. The Academy is made up of people who know more about movies than me. And the Academy is made up of people who know a hell of a lot more about movies than 95% of the fans out there. Because these are people who have worked in the film industry. These are actors and directors and costume designers and set designers and cinematographers and executives and publicists. And this is a group of 7,000 people that know the movies. And hey, it's all subjective. And if they happen to if they don't happen to nominate Logan for any of the major awards, and I don't think it's going to get nominated for any of the major awards, I think it has an outside shot at screenplay. But that's just because the Writers Guild nominated for screenplay. So there's an outside shot it could get a screenplay nomination. But no, there's nothing we as fans could do except to say, oh, well, one of the movies I like didn't get nominated. So really, there's nothing for us to do. Chris Martin writes, are you a fan of Clay Aiken? I know the name. I can't even remember who Clay Aiken is. I know the name. You said Clay Aiken. I know the name, but I don't know who that is. Is that a football player? Is that Someone's telling me he's a musician? Anyway. So that goes... I'm probably not a fan of him since I can't even remember exactly who he is. Nick Smith writes, what's your prediction for Best Picture at the Oscars? I think it's either going to be The Post or Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And right now I'm going to lead towards Three Billboards. I love that movie, man. I love it, and I saw it again, and I loved it even more the second time. And it's a shame, because I know a lot of you guys have not seen it, because the box office is not huge in this movie. It's a movie I'm going to be thinking about for years to come. I love that movie. So, and I think Shape of Water has a shot. Unfortunately, I think Lady Bird has a shot. I don't like Lady Bird. I know everybody loves it, and that's great. It was not for me. I watched it, and I didn't think it was all that impressive, but whatever. But I'm going to go either Three Billboards, which I think I'll put as the number one favorite, and then I'll put The Post underneath that. Master Jiang writes, have you seen The Phantom Thread? Thoughts? I liked it. I think it's great. It's great. Not top 5 movies of the year kind of great, but I think it's a great movie. Daniel Day-Lewis, again, does what Daniel Day-Lewis does. He always brings a world-class performance. And again, nobody's seen it, but Phantom Thread is really great. Trevor Brooks writes, Star Wars The Last Jedi is, SLJ is almost 70. Do you mean Samuel L. Jackson? By the way, guys, you got to stop writing in acronyms, because acronyms can mean anything. I'm going to assume you mean Samuel L. Jackson is almost 70. Coulson as new Nick Fury? I don't know. They seem pretty adamant that they're not going to bring Coulson into the movie universe, so I doubt it. Although that would be fun. Caden Staub writes, just saying you're the best, John. Get well soon. Thank you so much, Caden. I really appreciate that. Chris Warden writes, the so-called hardcore Star Wars fans bitching about The Last Jedi are the same fans bitching about Star Trek Discovery, in my opinion. Both are great. And I've been a fan my whole life. But, okay, look, but remember, Chris, it's still a movie. Star Wars The Last Jedi, as much as you may like it, as much as I may like it, it's a movie, and movies are subjective, and that means there are going to be people who don't like it. And just because they don't like it doesn't mean they're bitching about it. It just means they're expressing it did not work for them. And we should not only allow for that, we should celebrate that. Because if we don't, then you never have a right to complain about another movie. Or else you're just bitching and complaining. No, you're just expressing that the movie didn't work for you. Here's why you didn't think it worked and why you didn't think it was very good. And we need to not only accept that, we need to celebrate that we can have differences of opinion. And yes, I do get turned off a little bit by some of my hardcore Star Trek fan friends who refuse to accept anything about Star Trek Discovery just because it's not like the original Star Trek. Yeah, but whatever. But hey, man, that's art. Art is subjective. It's going to work for some people. It's not going to work for others. And we can't just negatively label people who may not think the way we think. You know what I'm saying? So I'm with you, Chris. I'm a fan with you. I like The Last Jedi and I love Star Trek Discovery. But let's not put labels on people that have differences of opinion than us, or else we give them the right to put those same labels on us whenever there's a movie we don't like. And that's not healthy for the film fan community. Anyway, Dr. Strangelove writes, with the new generation of Star Wars movies out, I'm now considering showing my kids the saga, starting with episode 1 and going through them chronologically. They won't have any preconceived notions. Look, there's no right or wrong answer. I know for me, I'm going to show my kids, whenever I have kids, I'm going to show my kids Star Wars in the order that they were meant to be shown, which is Star Wars, Empire, Return of the Jedi. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to leave it up to them if they ever want to watch new Star Wars movies and want to go and watch the prequels and all that kind of stuff. That's great. To me, it's the order they came out with, because that's really the order. Star Wars was the original story. And then there was Empire, and then there was Return of Jedi. And then the prequels became another thought. And those came later. Yes, chronologically they happened first, but in reality they didn't. And so, for me, I'm just doing an original trilogy. And then letting my kids decide after that. But there's no wrong answer. And if you feel like that's what's going to work best for you, then all power to you, man. That's great. As long as you're doing good parenting and showing your kids Star Wars in the first place, you're doing all right. All right, thanks a lot for the question, Dr. Strangelove. Next one comes to us from Luke1234, who writes, did you play hockey? Did I play hockey in Canada? It is law that all kids play hockey in Canada. I played every kind of hockey, man. I was those kids. I was that kid. Me and my buddies were those kids on the street with our hockey nets out on the street and going, car, and then pulling the nets off, then putting the nets back on, going up. We played foot hockey at recess at school. We played street hockey. We played ice hockey. My dad was one of those dads who would go to the local park, and he built a fountain, like a hydrant, in the local park. So in the winter, they could bulldoze out an area of snow in what was the football field, and flood it, ice it up, and make hockey rinks for the community. That's what my dad did. How great is my dad? And I played there. I played organized leagues. Yes, I played a lot of hockey growing up. So did my brother. And it is genetic law in Canada that you grow up playing hockey. That's why we're the best in the world, man. We got 1/10 the population of the Americans, and we kick your asses all the time. Anyway, yes, hockey is Canadian law. I do monologues, right? Favorite musical movie? I love Oliver and Scrooge. Man, there are some musicals I really love. Moulin Rouge is probably in my top 20 all-time favorite films. It's not in my top 10. But you heard me talk about Moulin Rouge all the time. The recent movie rendition of Les Mis with Anne Hathaway and Hugh Jackman, I thought was just marvelous. Marvelous. I love the Greatest Showman. I'm going to say Moulin Rouge. Even though it's a little different because it's not original songs, whereas, Les Mis is all original music to Les Mis. But that's another debate for another time. I'll go with, what did I just say? Moulin Rouge. I'll go with Moulin Rouge. Let's see. Lorna Chaudhry writes, hi, John. Love your show. Thank you so much, Lorna. When do you think that Fantastic Four will be in the MCU? By the way, get Ricola and get well soon. I've used Ricola, but when I have a cough like this, where it's really in my lungs, I find the menthol in the halls gives me more relief. Like when it's a sore throat cough, I find the Ricola works a little bit better. But when it's a cough that's down here in my chest, I find the halls do a little bit better of a job for me. As far as when the Fantastic Four will show up, really no idea. I mean, I don't know if they're going to bring them in the movies. I don't know if they're going to use them as a separate television series. I don't know if they're just going to sit them on the shelf and pick and choose out some of their villains to use in the MCU. I really don't know. I'll say this. I feel confident that we won't see anything from the Fantastic Four until at least 2020. I feel pretty confident about that. Could be wrong. Maybe they'll rush something out with it. But I think the earliest we'll see anything with Fantastic Four in it will probably be 2020, maybe more realistically 2021. But then again, that's just a guess. That's just me guessing. Don't hold me to that. I could be completely wrong about that. Andrew Murray writes, Spielberg's next Indiana Jones or West Side Story? I gotta be honest with you, man. Me and my buddy Ryan, we just watched Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade yesterday while we were waiting for the UFC to start. That movie is so fucking good. That movie is so good. It has reaffirmed to me that Last Crusade is my favorite Indiana Jones movie. Yes, this is a castle, and yes, we have many tapestries, but if you are Scottish Lord, then I am Mickey Mouse. I just, that movie kills me. Every time I watch it, I love that movie so much. I'm not all that stoked for the next Indiana Jones movie, I'll be completely honest with you. I just think it's going to be kind of sad. But don't get me wrong. I mean, if they want to make it, that's great, and I celebrate anybody else who wants to go see it. I'm not all that looking forward to it. So I can go with West Side Story. Felix Alvarez writes, do you think Tarantino's Star Trek will look like the original show? 50% over or under. Is that something you'd like to see live long and prosper? No, it's not something I want to see. I am curious about a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek. And knowing how completely anchored Tarantino is to everything old, I'm going to say there's a 51% chance. So I'll take slightly the over. There's a 51% chance that if this Tarantino movie even happens, remember, it is not a sure thing that this movie's even going to happen. But if this Tarantino movie happens, I'll take the slight over that he may try to incorporate the old aesthetic of the show, and I don't want to see that, but it's Tarantino. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'll go see whatever he does, but we'll have to see what they end up doing with that. Good question, Felix. All right. Maybe One Name writes, I thought a few of the Lego sets for Solo had a bit of a prequel aesthetic. Do you think we might see some aesthetic elements of the prequels in Solo? Well, let's not read too much into what the aesthetics of a Lego set are, because Legos look like Legos. So let's not read it too much into that. Look, the Star Wars universe has an aesthetic that is consistent, even though there are unique things, definitely, but they're pretty much consistent from the prequels into the original trilogy and even into the new films. I don't see a world of difference between them, per se. They definitely go for that lived-in universe kind of feel. So I expect to feel some similarities in the aesthetics, but simply because I think there are threads of similarities in the aesthetics throughout the entire entity of the Star Wars world, whether you're talking about prequels, original trilogy, the new films, the cartoons. I kind of feel that there. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to feel some similarity there as we get into Solo. Let's see. Beatmaster writes, remind Samuel of how many comic book movies are YA material. Well, YA, though, is not just anything directed at young people per se. YA, there's a few more specific things to YA. I don't know that we, like, for instance, I'll say Runaways. Runaways is definitely a YA material kind of comic book movie. That I'll completely agree with. But I think most comic book movies aren't. It all depends on what we agree upon as a baseline definition, which I don't think we've ever done. But I would probably suggest that most comic book films are not YA material. Something like Runaways does seem to target itself to a YA kind of audience, and that's why I would say that comic book material would, but I don't know, Beatmaster, if I would agree with you that we can look at other comic book movies and classify them as YA. Things that are just directed at younger audiences does not automatically make it YA. YA is a very specific kind of feel and genre, like a Runaways, like a Hunger Games, like a Maze Runner, like Mortal, I can't remember, whatever that Mortal City of Stupid is. I can't even remember the name of it. But I think they're a little bit different. But I see where you're coming from. I just think there's a little bit of a difference. Chris Martin writes, around 2013, I started looking for a daily movie news show and started with AMC Movie Talk, then Collider Now, Collider Movie Talk, then Collider Now, the John Campea Show. Please don't stop the content ever. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate that. And as a film fan, man, I love talking movies. And I love debating movies. I love, being fanboys with other people cheering for the same things. I love it when we get into debates and because of our differences of opinions. Being a fan of movies is just the best. And you guys allow me to be a fan of movies with you, and that's the best thing in the world. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate you very much. Dr. Strangelove writes in, the Clone Wars cartoon got Hayden's Anakin exactly right. The Clone Wars animated Anakin seems totally disconnected from the movies, and I can't stand it. Thoughts? The Clone Wars cartoon got Anakin right. The Clone Wars animated Anakin, I gotta tell you, Doctor, I'm not exactly sure what it is you're talking about. What's the difference between cartoon and animated? Animated and cartoon are the same thing. So I'm struggling with what the point is you're making. Let me read it again. The Clone Wars cartoon got Hayden's Anakin exactly right. The Clone Wars animated seemed totally disconnected from the movies. And I can't stand it. Thoughts? Again, I don't know. When you say something, I don't know what you're talking about. Unfortunately, you had to be more specific. I apologize, Dr. Strangelove, but I don't know what you're talking about when you say the Clone Wars animated versus the Clone Wars cartoon. So I can't address it. I apologize, but I can't grasp what it is you're going for there. Mike Stevenson writes, surprised billionaires don't fund sequels to films they loved as kids, i.e., Musk funding Goonies 2. I do Last Starfighter or Legend of Korra. Your choice. Bring that filthy. And viewers, go Patreon. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Look, a lot of billionaires became billionaires because they didn't throw money away. And when you're talking about making big blockbuster movies, you're talking about investing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that you don't know if it's going to make money or not. And billionaires do not become billionaires by just throwing around money like that. If they believe they can get money by doing that, they do it. If they don't, they don't. But I'm with you. If I had $3 billion to my name, I would put up $200 million to make a Last Starfighter remake. I would put up $175 million to make a Star Blazers or Space Battleship Yamato movie. I would put up, $150 million to make a sequel to Mystery Men. I would do that, and then I would quickly go broke because I'm not that good with money. I'm with you. I would exactly do the same thing. All right. Maximum Effort 44T writes, remember in Avengers Age of Ultron, Ultron said, when the Earth settles, God throws a stone and he's winding up. This seems like foreshadowing of Thanos in the CC and D23 trailer, throwing a moon at them. Very astute that you saw that. That's incredibly observant of you. I don't think there is a connection there. I don't think they said the one thing to foreshadow something that they were going to do in Ultron. Ultron was thinking about his own plan, not something that might happen later on in Infinity War. So I don't think there's a connection there. But man, Maximum Effort, that's incredibly observant of you to even remember those details. That's impressive. That's really impressive. ZCM Zombie Custom Maps writes, when making or giving a movie a rating with the 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 star rating system, how and what should I look for to qualify something as 1 star? Oh man, I can't answer that for you. Because first of all, I don't even give ratings to movies anymore. When I do my movie reviews, I simply tell you what I think. I tell you about the things I liked about it, tell you about the things I didn't. I make a mention if I think you might like it or not, blah, blah, but I don't even give ratings anymore. Because too many people completely misinterpret ratings. So honestly, it's all subjective. It's all subjective. What is a 1 to you may not be a 1 to another person. The reason I stopped giving rating systems is because what a 7 out of 10 to me proved to be something totally different from what 7 out of 10 meant to a lot of people. Because, I think 7 out of 10 means a really solid movie. To me, 7 out of 10 is only 3 numbers away from perfect. Right? To me, 7 out of 10 is a solid score. But I would give movies 7 out of 10 and have people, oh, John, why'd you hate it? Why'd you hate that movie, John? Because we live in a society where everything now is 10, 10, 10, or 0, 0, 0. If somebody like it, it's a 10, it's perfect, it should win every Oscar. They slightly didn't like it. That movie sucks, it's the worst thing ever. So, yeah. So I don't even think in terms of number systems anymore because every number represents a different thing to a different person. It doesn't mean the same thing to you that it means to somebody else. So if you want to give something a numerical system, you go for it, but just give it whatever it means to you. Because there is no standard out there. So bottom line, ZC, if you want to give a score to something, just whatever it means to you. If something to you is a 1, give it a 1. There's no other, there's no other criteria other than what it is to you. So you need to handle it that way. Hunter Blasberg writes, and we're getting into the last number of questions here. Would you ever do something like Sports Talk Saturday? I would love to, but if I ever do, I'd need to create a separate YouTube channel for it. Because one of the things I learned about YouTube and how YouTube works and how channels work is that quite often the audience subscribe to a YouTube channel for the content that's there. My content on this channel is primarily about the art of entertainment, movies and television. For me to throw in a sideball, there's a lot of people who watch my channel every day who are simply not sports fans. So doing a sports show on this channel would probably not be idealistic. What I would probably do, if I ever want to, is create a separate channel to do like a UFC recap show, a Sports Talk Saturday or something like that. I would have to create a separate channel. Right now, I'm having a hard time keeping my head above water, just keeping up with this channel. But maybe if I get more Patreon supporters and I'm able to hire a little bit of help, and then maybe I can start expanding what I do. But it's always something I have on my mind, man. Always something I have on my mind. All right. Anthony Cullen writes, over under 60%. Kanan is killed by Rook trying to rescue Hera. I'm tasking the over. I feel the traitor alluded to that. I'll take the under. I would take the over that Kanan is going to be killed. And it's funny because I was just tweeting yesterday with Freddie Prinze Jr. But we weren't talking about Rebels. I'll take the over 60% that he gets killed. I'm not going to take the over 60% on who specifically kills him or how he specifically dies. So I'm not going to do that. We still have a lot of episodes to go before the season finale in May. Or March, I should say. So I will take the under. To your specific situation you're setting up, Anthony, I will take the under. I do believe he's going to die. I'm just not going to take the over that is by one specific means. All right. Kalis Menon writes, have Franco's chances of Oscars decreased since last week's news? Also, do you think there will be a lightsaber duel in episode? Well, one question. Your podcast has been getting me through the first week of the semester. Great. I'm glad my podcast can do that for you, Kaz. This has come up a few times in the last few weeks. Do we think some of the rumors and everything going on in the reports about, let's say, James Franco are going to lessen his chances at the Academy Awards? I don't think so. First of all the nominations are set, so we know that. They get announced, I believe it's Tuesday morning. The Academy Award nominations get announced. Now, then the voting from the whole Academy happens after that. But first of all, I don't think Franco's going to win anyway. So that kind of becomes irrelevant. Would it have affected? I don't know. I don't know that there's real enough solid stuff out there that it would have persuaded people one way or the other about how they would have voted on it this year. Maybe next year that's different. But I honestly don't think it's going to have that much of an impact. But also, I don't think it really needs to have that much of an impact because I don't see him winning anyway. I really don't. I don't see a situation where he wins at the Academy Awards anyway. Adam K. writes, thoughts on All the Money in the World? Solid movie. Not great, kind of slow, longer than it needed to be. The integration of the Christopher Plummer stuff was seamless. I felt nothing, and I was really afraid there would be some really jarring moments, and you can tell, this is something that was reshot to take out Kevin Spacey and put in Christopher Plummer and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I thought that was seamless. Marvelous job by Ridley Scott, the way they pulled that together. Laura Chandri writes, hey, John, when do you think they will start casting on the movie It? I think they probably have already started casting. We're just not going to hear anything about it for a while. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if right now they already have their cast. I think they probably have their cast. But we're not going to hear about it for quite a while. So I don't know. Give it maybe around summer. Maybe around summer they'll start making announcements about who they've cast to play the movie. Kevin Bennett writes, possibility of Anne hosting in your place every blue moon. She's smart, funny, and has a much better mug. Well, there's no... Hey, Anne! She's yelling yes. You come here for a second? Or are you just getting out of the shower or something? She's here.
Love it.
Oh dear, here she comes. So, Anne has heard your plea And hosting. I don't know. Would you even want to host it?
Absolutely.
I mean, without me? Really? You don't want to do it without me?
But all the questions have to be about Porgs or Tom Hanks. Only.
There's a problem. Or Justin Timberlake. I think. Thank you, baby. Who knows? 2018 is filled with possibilities. Who knows what'll happen? Okay, let's move on. Only a couple questions left here. She's waiting for me to finish this show because we're supposed to go and watch the football game. Okay, Beatmaster writes, the Orville seems to do well with classic Trek. Well, yeah, I mean, the Orville is such a ripoff of Star Trek. It's not an homage and it's not a parody. The Orville, and it's hit or miss with me. There's some episodes I quite like. But the Orville, let's just call it what it is. The Orville is just a blatant ripoff of Star Trek. It's not a spoof. It's not an homage. It's just a blatant ripoff. And it is not. I mean, there are elements that are classic Star Trek, but it is so far removed from classic Trek. It's so I wouldn't. No, Beatmaster, I don't agree with you on that. I think there are going to be a bunch of people who would agree with you on that, but I don't. I don't agree with you on that. But that's the fun about being fans, man. We can have the same opinion. We can have different opinions. That's great. John Hine writes, over under 60% that nobody dies by the end of Rebels. I'll take the 0% that that's true. I think Kanan's dead. I think Ezra's dead. I think Zeb's dead. I think, why am I forgetting the name of the Mandalorian girl? Sabine. Thank you, Anne. I think Sabine's dead. The only ones who I don't think are dead are Hera or Chopper. And I think that's it. I think everybody else dies, I'll be honest with you. Chris Martin writes, I know you're a fan of Hot Toys. Have you seen the Obi-Wan Mythos figure? It looks like a mix between Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness. It's amazing. If I'm thinking of the one you're talking about, I believe I have seen it. If I'm thinking of the right one, I might be thinking of the wrong one. But let's put it this way. Freaking everything Hot Toys puts out is so freaking good. Like my one regret in life is that I do not have enough money to buy a new Hot Toys figure every week. That is my one big regret in life. I wish I could. Instead, I buy like one or two a year. You can see a couple of them in the background there, but they just all look so remarkable. And they do such a good job making those things. It's just crazy good. Let's see. Where did it go? KW Garrett writes, just watched your Man of Steel review for the first time. Wow. Usually everybody who watches me says they start to watch me with my Man of Steel review. Anyway, just watched your Man of Steel review for the first time. The YouTube comments are vicious, and I don't understand why. Was this movie patient zero for toxic fandom? Oh, no. Lots and lots. There was toxic fandom long before Man of Steel. Believe you me, my friend. Believe you me. But yeah, I love Man of Steel. Love that movie. There were a whole bunch of people. That movie's not what they wanted it to be. There were a lot of people who had an image in their head of what Superman's supposed to look like. They made a new Superman that I thought was magnificent. I love Man of Steel. Easily the best DCEU movie they've ever made, by far. And in my top 10 all-time favorite comic book movies. Kalis Menon writes, when will they make a Batman Beyond movie to reboot the DCEU? Fucking never. Never do a Batman Beyond movie. It's stupid. Look, and I'm not poo-pooing on any. If you like Batman Beyond, that's great. That's awesome. I celebrate that. There are many things I love. I'm sure you think we're stupid too. Batman is Bruce Wayne. If you want to have a few side stories where Dick Grayson takes over or Azrael takes over, or you want to do something like that, that's fine. To the general public, Batman is Bruce Wayne. There's a reason Batman Beyond got canceled. It got canceled because nobody watched it. A very small number of people actually watched it. So, no, you're never going to see them make a Batman Beyond. You might get a Batman Beyond animated movie, maybe. But from them getting so desperate to make a live-action Batman Beyond movie, we're 15, 20 years away because nobody would go see it. Nobody would go see it. Chris Martin writes, did you see Kevin Hart, What Now? No, I haven't seen that. And I like Kevin Hart a lot, but I have not seen that. Paul the Boss writes, hey, John, I'm not saying Disney has an agenda in this, but don't you think it's strange that most men in the new Star Wars movies are depicted as inherently flawed, but most women are pretty much flawless? I completely disagree with that. I reject that. Outright, I completely reject that. I mean, Poe is better than any Force user as a pilot. Poe is like the ultimate hero of the rebellion and all this or of the resistance, I should say. Even so much so that even Kylo Ren knows who he is when they took him on board and they captured him as a pilot. Really the main heart story is revolving around Finn. Rey is this naive girl who's easy to trick and easy to deceive. She's so easily manipulated, all that kind of stuff. The one woman they've really made come across as truly strong is Leia. But that's no different from the original trilogy. Again, to anybody that says that, it's a feminist agenda because they're focusing on women in these movies. Well, you had 6 previous movies that all focused on male leads. Were they anti-feminist? Because you don't get to say one without saying the other. And anyway, so I kind of reject that way of thinking, Paul. I really do. Rob Krozak writes, it's pronounced Korchak. Well, there you go. A super chat just to let me know how to pronounce his name because he knew I was going to mispronounce the name. Thank you for sending that in, Rob. And that will do it for me, guys, for this installment of the John Campea Show on a Sunday. Again, guys, let me remind you that starting tomorrow, the John Campea Show goes live at 8 a.m. LA time. That's 11 a.m. New York time. Make sure you join me for that. And then also tomorrow is the first episode. We're going to try this for a few weeks. I think it's going to go well, where we have a show at 4 p.m. LA time. That's 7 p.m. New York time, called Open Mic, where it's just going to be an hour show that was just like this. It's just taking all live questions. The John Campea Show, we're only going to take a couple of live questions, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 at most. But in that show, the John Campea Show is now going to be about 30 minutes to maybe 40 minutes. And Open Mic starts tomorrow. It's going to be Monday through Friday, later in the afternoon or the early evening, depending on where you live. And it's just going to be all open live questions from you guys. And you guys can send in audio questions or video questions. Don't forget about that. Email those to me at john@thejohncampeashow.com. Put the word Open Mic in the subject line and include the link to your YouTube video, or include an attached MP3, and remember, keep it to 20 seconds or less. Anyway, guys, that will do it for me. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is John Campea, and until my next video, bye-bye.